My paranormal experiences happened in varied places, affected my life, and changed the way I think about things forever. I've kind of made a career almost of Bigfoot, hunting. But what I'm going to talk about is things that have happened to me that are not Bigfoot related. I was Bigfooting at the time that this happened, but this is not Bigfoot related, I don't believe. There's a very famous spot. It's called SOHA, SOHA, and it stands for Southern Oregon Habituation Area. And this was established by Dr. Matthew Johnson. I'm sure a lot of the listeners know who that is. If you don't, he is one of the first celebrity type person in the Bigfoot world. He's one of the first people that did extensive interviews. He was, on CBS This Morning and various different, national TV shows after his sighting of a Bigfoot near the Oregon Caves in Southern Oregon. And this was years back. But anyway, this area where I was going was made famous by him. It used to be his habituation area, and it was always a big secret. It was actually known that he would put bandanas over people's eyes and stuff on the way there so they wouldn't know how to get there. It was a very secretive location. I actually went there the first time with Adam Davis, very famous world explorer, cryptozoologist. He's a great guy, too. If you've ever met Adam, he's a really, really great guy. We went there because Adam had a paranormal experience there at SOHA. And he had talked at length of, you can find it if you look for it. But just very briefly, him and his buddy John Carlson were there with Matthew Johnson. And they actually had a portal open up. And these little black guys came out. They weren't Bigfoot. They were little black humanoid figures. They kept coming out. Long story short, the flash of a flashlight would make them disappear. The portal would disappear, and then it would regenerate. And this happened all night long at this location, SOHA. I would beg you to check out the story, look into it. Adam detailed it in his last book. There's a lot of documentation online of Adam's experiences there. So I'm at the same place where this happened. I'm here with my buddy Mike Jones. And he's a guy that I go Bigfooting with all the time here in Southern Oregon, right near the Medford area. He lives in Medford. I live in Eagle Point. So we're out here at SOHA. And these days, Mike Jones and I are pretty much the only people that go there. Nobody really knows where it is still. We've kind of taken possession of that area, and we go there quite often. So I get off work late at night, like 10:30 at night, one night. And me and Mike had decided that we were going to meet up and go do a late night sit out at SOHA. We got together right after I got off work, and we drove out there. It's a good hour and a half from Medford. It's out there a ways. So we get there, and we spent some time there. It's really, really, really dark. And we like to just shut everything off and just absorb all the sounds of the forest and such when it's really dark. So where we're at this SOHA location is the very top of a ridge. It's way up above the valley floors, at least a couple thousand feet higher than the valley floors below. And it's very steep on both sides, and you're right at the very crest. So although it's forested, completely forested, it drops off fast on both sides. And when you're looking out into the forest, you can actually see spots between the trees where you can see the air out. The air is kind of lit up by the moon. It's hard to describe, but out there it's kind of a lightish blue as opposed to the black of every tree in the forest, if that makes any sense at all. But it's very dark, very, very dark. So it's just a little bit lighter in places out here. And the reason is, like I said, it drops off so fast that the trees don't block the sky. So you can actually see it in places. So we're here, very, very quiet night. We really didn't have any Bigfoot action at all to speak of. And we were just kind of just hanging out. And I looked off. If you drove in there, it's kind of like a cul-de-sac. But at the back of the cul-de-sac, there's a trail that heads on up the mountain. It would be on the left side about 9 o'clock from where you would camp, where Matthew Johnson used to camp. And I see this figure through the trees. In between the trees, I could see that light in the background. So I see this silhouette of this figure, and it moved like a Bigfoot. You know, the famous patty walk with the swinging arms, the arm swung behind the body. That was looking towards me, and it walked out of my view into the trees. What really struck me about this humanoid figure that I saw was that it was very, very tall, very tall. I'm talking like 12 feet tall. And it was not a Bigfoot. For one thing, there was no hair that I could see coming off it. It was very sleek and very thin. I was shocked. I was just staring into the forest going, what did I just see? You know I saw something. It was moving. It was looking at us. It was just a fleeting glance, but it was very tall and very thin figure in the woods, a humanoid figure. And so I didn't hardly even talk about this thing, but for some reason on a comment thread on Facebook, somebody was talking about something weird and different. And I just happened to mention that I seen this thing. I thought I was the only one in the whole world who ever saw this. All right. And John Carlson pops up on Facebook. John Carlson is the one that was there with Adam when the creatures came out of the portal. And John Carlson tells me that I saw him as well, Dan. I saw him a couple different times. I saw the same thing. At that time, I was like, whoa, that just blew me away because I thought I was the only one that saw this. And now it's confirmation of what I saw because somebody else saw the same thing in the same location. And then just a couple days ago, I was talking to John Carlson again online, and it gave me chills because he told me where I described the location, the 9 o'clock. If you're standing there looking towards the back of the thing, that's exactly where he described that he saw both times he's seen them, was in that 9 o'clock location at SOHA in those woods with the mountain falling off and you can see the sky between the trees. And he saw the same thing I saw. So, that kind of wraps up that particular paranormal experience. I'd like to tell you guys about another thing that happened. This is about, I think it was October of 2018. And again, I was with Mike Jones and I was with another friend of mine, David Osborne. And we were at this place where Mike Jones has been squatching for years by Squaw Lakes, which is very near Applegate Lake in extreme Southern Oregon. It's right near the California border. So we're out here, me and Dave and Mike, and we decided to take a night walk. We walk out down the road, again, super dark. We had no lights on or nothing. We didn't bring any flashlights or we didn't have any flashlights on. And we walked down the road from where we park. And we had a little rustling going on, a little grunting and stuff. But what was important was on the way back, we started seeing these flashes in the woods, these flashes of light. And I mean, it wasn't like 50 feet away or something. This was happening like 10, 20 feet away from us, just right off the road, just right in the forest. And all three of us were seeing them. And we were all, talking about it and going, what the heck's going on here? It was really weird. And we got back to the camp and we were around the fire for a while, talking like we do and stuff. And we decided to go to bed. So we go to bed and I'm in my Suburban, in the back of my Suburban. And Mike Jones is in a tent outside my Suburban there, and parked right up by us is Dave Osborne. And he's got his cab over camper on his truck. He's got a big old camper on there. So we've all got our separate sleeping quarters, and we went to bed. It was quite cold. So I had lots and lots of covers and I was pretty much set. I wake up in the middle of the night. I don't know. It was like probably 1 o'clock in the morning or something. And I had to do my business like all older guys have to do in the middle of the night. So I step out of the side of the Suburban and I go ahead and I go to the bathroom real quick. And I get back in and I start wrestling with these covers, trying to get comfortable with all this. I had a bunch of covers, but I needed them because it was kind of cold. So I'm wrestling with the covers and all of a sudden this flash of light comes through my Suburban, like bright, really bright light. It looked like somebody took a spotlight and just run it right through my cab. And I jumped up, looked up, and I'm sitting up in the back of my Suburban looking around and I don't see nothing. And it's like, what the heck just happened? Where did that light come from? And Dave's camper door is shut. Mike's tent's all shut up. Nobody's out there. And I was just like, that's really weird. So I go to bed. I get all snugged up and go to bed. And about 5 o'clock in the morning, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden I'm there sweating from head to toe, just soaked in sweat. And my foot hurts. And I'm going, what the heck? And I start looking around and I've got this big scratch on the top of my foot. I even slipped on my shoes when I stepped out to go to the bathroom, and I had shoes on the whole time. I don't know how in the heck I got this cut on the top of my foot. And I'm just a sweaty mess, and my freaking nose hurts. I'm like, what in the heck's going on here? So I get up that next morning and I asked these guys, did you guys get up? Did somebody get up and flash a light or something? They're like, no, neither one of them got up. I look at my legs, and there's these straight lines across my legs in two different places. And my left nostril, man, like way up in my left side, was really hurting. And I'm like, what in the heck is going on? And then after that, I didn't even notice it at the time, but over time, on my index finger on my hand, there was this hole in my fingernail that at the time was down in the quick. And as it grew out, I could see that hole all the way. So there was this weird hole in my finger. And the nose thing, I started having nosebleeds out of just the left side of my nose quite a bit. And it lasted for like months, the pain. And what's really weird is on my forehead, straight above my left nostril, there's like a dent in my forehead, which is really strange. But Vic, I got to tell you, all that stuff, it would lead somebody to maybe believe this or that or whatever. But the one symptom that I came out of that, the most important one and the biggest one and the most impactful one was, it was like there was a switch that was switched off in my mind. I was in the middle of producing a Bigfoot documentary that I'd worked on for a long time. I'd collected a lot of great evidence. I had all kinds of really good video. I had interviews. I had Bob Gimlin, other friends of mine in the field. It was the only thing I could talk about or think about was making this movie. I was so excited. I was already into it. Vic, you know what it's like to do production things. I'd already had 2 or 3 different scenes that I was working on, and I was really excited about this thing. But there was like a switch that went off in my head. And when I got up that morning, I doubted everything. I doubted every bit of evidence that was on there. I doubted that anybody would believe any of it. I'm telling you, Vic, something happened to me. Something happened to me that was really a paranormal experience. And people can think what they want about what happened to me or what, but I'm telling you, something somehow got in my head and flipped off a switch. And I guess that's about the long and short of that story. This third one was really, really cool, really crazy, really intense. Totally different place. I'm not in Oregon anymore. I go to see my buddy. His name is Greg Feynman. He lives in Trinidad, Colorado. And Trinidad's right down by the New Mexico border. It's a mountains on one side and prairies on the other. So my friend Greg used to be in law enforcement. And for years, he built up this paranormal investigation thing because he ended up getting rheumatoid arthritis where he couldn't work. So he was trying to find something else he could do with his time and be useful. And he's really interested in the paranormal. So he started investigating cattle mutilations, which, lucky for him, a guy 15 miles from him right outside of town has been on the Discovery Channel and National Geographic and all these because of the cattle mutilations that have happened at his place. So Greg went out and met the guy, and he got hooked up with this guy, and he started investigating the cattle mutilations. And the one thing that he did that I don't know if anybody else has done it yet was he got a psychic out there with him. He got Mama Sue out there with him. They have really done an incredible job of uncovering what's behind the mutilations and what's going on there. The psychic also, what she does is she's not like the kind of person that can read your mind or or tell your future. What she does is she helps people pass to the other side. People who are having trouble with problems in their life or whatever that they can't grapple. People might think that they're going to end up going to hell because of the person they were. And she works these people through it and take them to the pearly gates and help them get to heaven. Now, I'm just telling you, I'm not going to question anything because we could talk all night about these things. I'm just going to tell you what's going on and you guys can decide. All right. So Mama Sue was out with Greg in contact with the Greys, who are in fact responsible for the cattle mutilations. And through the bones of one of the cattle, Mama Sue experienced the trauma and experienced going into the UFO and what happened to the cow. And somehow that opened up a line of communication to the Greys. So that's why they're out there, is trying to contact the Greys and learn more about what's going on. Now, another very interesting aspect is in the 1.5 mile stretch that goes right through this rancher's property, there's been an ungodly amount of car crashes over the last 15 years. I mean, something like 22 deadly car crashes. The rancher actually witnessed one time a car elevate off the ground about 6 feet off the highway and turn sideways and come back down. And of course, it rolled numerous times. And there was a lady in there with her little girls. The little girls lived. The lady did not. These Greys were actually doing this, causing these wrecks because they were trying to capture a human soul. They can manipulate time. So basically, they'd make it super slow, and they're trying to get there and somehow capture that soul as it comes out of the body. Now, this is something that was found out over time. At the time when I went there, I'm not sure that they even knew that yet. I don't think they did. I actually went to Colorado to help my buddy because while Sue and Greg were out there, she can see dead people sometimes. She saw this woman with a man, and the woman was wearing a hat. And for some reason, she got a name out of that. It's a very, very long, intricate story, but this is another long story that I'm going to have to cut really short because of our time constraints. But basically, this is the weirdest thing. Sue's nephew has a little bit of ability like she does, but not as powerful as her. But he went and he whispered in her ear and he told her, the name's not that, the name is this. And she wanted me to tell you that. And he said, I don't know what that means. And they find this name, the missing persons. So they're in Trinidad and they found the woman missing. There's pictures, of course, and bam, Sue says, that's the woman right there. That's the woman I saw. And they thought that the woman had died in a car crash. So they were looking locally, and all around like the local records to try to find this woman. Turns out this woman disappeared from Phoenix, Arizona, 600 miles away or something. And she made contact again with the woman. They went out there again, made contact with this spirit, and she got the story. And this poor woman was abducted from a convenience store in Phoenix, Arizona, and she was drugged. Somebody put a shot in her neck or something right there. Well, she was trying to help somebody with a broken down car, and they threw her in the car, and then she was taken to some warehouse place somewhere where the women who originally abducted her met up with these guys. So these guys started doing stuff. I'm going to be mindful of the fact that there may be kids listening. Let's just say they were treating her very terribly. And she jumped up and fought like the Dickens. Sue says she kicked and she fought and she was screaming. There was 3 guys that had her captive and she tried to run away. And one of the guys had a machete and he threw the machete at her and he nearly severed her arm. And from there, they got her back and then they had damaged merchandise because, what are they going to do with her now? So again, being mindful of the young audience, I don't want to go into too much detail. Well, let's just say that the poor girl was still alive and they finished the job with the machete and she ended up in a garbage bag. Then they took off down the road from there. And the story is that they threw that garbage bag off right there in the river at that very spot where this guy's ranch is and where Greg and Sue are doing their investigation. And that's why she was there. So Greg and Sue both of them with rheumatoid arthritis real bad, are down in that riverbed trying to find some trace of this girl, trying to prove this story, trying to show the world that this poor girl has an ending to this story. And I've been careful not to say the name because, there's still a family out there somewhere. And until we find actual proof, well, I'm not going to say her name. So my friend is out there in this river trying to find this woman's body or a piece or a part or something, And the poor guy, he drives around in a wheelchair inside his house. And when he goes to the store, that's pretty much his only trip all day. He can go to the store. That's it. He's really got the rheumatoid arthritis bad. And he's down there in this creek bed. And I hear this and I had to go. I had to go help my buddy out. I had to go help him because I'm an able-bodied person. I might be getting up there in age, but I can still out hike a lot of young kids. I got it in me. I knew I could do it if it was going to be done. So I went there. I went there to help out my buddy Greg and to help him possibly find this woman's body or part of it or something. I went up and down that creek. Long story short on that, we haven't found anything yet, and we're unable to obtain cadaver dogs. There's just not enough evidence for them to deem it a worthwhile thing to take cadaver dogs out there at this point. But back to the paranormal experience. When I got there to Greg's, like I said, he'd been building this business, or more a hobby, but, hoping to someday do something with it. But he'd been building it for years. He has all this great equipment for paranormal investigation, things I'd never seen before. And he had it all laid out on his workbench in his garage. So I got there, and just shortly after I got there, he took me down in the basement and in the garage, and he showed me all this cool stuff. And he's showing me these really nice recorders and body cams and stuff. He's got a spirit box, and he gets to this item. It's called a portal. And I'd never heard of it before, never seen it. And he turns this thing on, and it has like a loop, a pre-recorded loop that it plays of male and female voices speaking, and it's all backwards. So they're all speaking garbled backwards language. And anything that comes through that speaker that's not backwards is supposed to be a spirit. And they would use that technology. Also, there's a microphone on it, and the microphone is what picks that up, apparently. And it also picks up your voice while you're talking. So we're talking, and it's echoing back with this machine, and he turns it on. It sounds funny, and we're like laughing and stuff and making jokes. And, we were talking about this girl that's missing, and I just made the comment, just jokingly, of course, because I do believe in the psychic. I do believe in Sue. But I was just joking as though I was a skeptic. And I said, yeah, unless it's just all bull. And immediately, as soon as I said that, in a really clear female voice, we hear, "Oh, I think not." And I was just like, whoa, what the heck just happened? And Greg turns it off. He's all, "Oh, no, we can't do anything else without Sue, so we know what's going on." And I'm just like, oh my God, what just happened? Oh, whoa. I mean, I was blown away, Vic. It was clear as a bell. Oh, I think not. So I'm like, okay, this is pretty crazy. So then, like I said, we went out, and I went up and down that river in the riverbed, and I never found nothing, And he had that box out there on his tailgate, and it seemed to be saying, "Go further, go further." And I didn't know if she meant further towards the truck or further down the river but we went out there with Sue that night and to try to make contact with the Greys or whatever. I'm basically an observer. I'm sitting in the back seat, right? But we get there, and she's trying to make contact with this woman, see if she's out there. And then she says that she's there. The woman is there, but she won't come too close. So I'm holding this EMF meter in my hand, and Greg's got the cameras, tripod camera. He's got a handheld camera. He's videotaping Sue, and Sue's, speaking to the entity and trying to get her to come closer and touch the thing or whatever. this went on for quite some time, and we're not getting nothing. No hits on the EMF meter, but she says she's right there. And it was the weirdest thing. Greg mentioned something about, I think I mentioned before, that Sue, when she's helping people cross, that sometimes people are afraid that maybe they've done something wrong. Maybe they're going to go to hell. Maybe they shouldn't cross. So there's a lot of hesitancy sometimes. And Greg said, but you don't have to go across if you don't want right now. And Sue says, oh yeah, you don't have to if you don't want to. You can still stay and hang out. And that EMF meter that I was holding, it just went off. It was just like, boom, all the way to the top, and just boom, 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 boom. Just like, I was blown away. I was like, whoa. And something clicked. All these paranormal shows and everything, they're like trying to get these spirits to jump through hoops. You really want a reaction from a spirit? You talk about something that's really affecting them personally right now. Boy, she was all over that EMF meter. So we go on and we're talking to her, and she would respond, and we were making light of things, It was funny because Sue said that she really took a liking to me and that she was kind of like hanging out with me. So I thought that was kind of cool, And then Greg and Sue mentioned that, we're all going to be going back to Greg's house, and she can come back there if she wants. And Greg and Sue are going to sleep in Greg's big king bed. They weren't together or nothing, but, there's only one big bed. And they're good friends, So, and then she said, but Dan will be on the couch or something. I said, yeah, I'll be on the couch all alone. And that thing, all of a sudden, it lit up again. Oh, boom, 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 boom. It was funny, Vic. We were laughing really hard, but it was like we were sharing a joke with a spirit, man. It was crazy. It was really crazy. And this story, it goes on. A lot more stuff happened. It actually became Bigfoot related at one point. My buddy's been gifting the Bigfoot out there, and they've been taking them. That's the next step. That's the thing. If you want to check out any of this stuff, you can always go to Big Truth on YouTube. I've documented the thing over there in Colorado pretty well. In fact, the story I just told, I got it pretty well documented, which was right after it happened. So it was a lot fresher in my mind than this interview. I think that's about going to wrap it up for now for me, Vic.
My paranormal experience probably is a little bit different than most other people. My name's Chris McKinnell, and I'm the director of the Warren Legacy Foundation for Paranormal Research. I've been doing this work for over 40 years now. I started with two people that most people in the paranormal world know. My grandparents, Ed and Lorraine Warren, from The Conjuring and Annabelle movies. And as you can imagine, that had quite an impact on me growing up. I was terrified of ghosts and the dark. From the time I was 8 years old until I was 16, I could not sleep without the light on. I was brought to psychologists and psychiatrists and social workers, all trying to help me to overcome these fears that nobody seemed to be able to understand. Back then, my grandparents weren't as famous. It wasn't something that was in the public consciousness. Oh, your grandparents hunt ghosts? Well, gee, I wonder why you're afraid of ghosts. But after suffering from this tremendous fear for so many years, when I was 16, my grandfather decided he didn't like seeing me suffer like this and felt that I need to face my fears. And he just so happened to have one of the worst cases that we have ever faced. This was up in Lee, Massachusetts in 1980, the summer of 1980. I was 16 years old. We went up there with a gentleman named Paul Bartz. He was an assistant to my grandfather and grandmother, worked at the University of Connecticut, as a matter of fact. When we got to this little tiny tract house, the husband and wife were sitting outside on the stoop. They were afraid to go in the house without us. Downstairs, there was just a small living room and a small kitchen. Very few pieces of furniture were left. The refrigerator had been removed. A lot of the heavier stuff. There was one sofa, one recliner, And that was it. The reason for that is because this was a poltergeist case and things were flying all over. As we started walking up the stairs, the whole house was shaking from pounding going on in the walls. We could hear clawing right next to our ear in the walls and growling. When I got to the top of the stairs and I looked in the bathroom around the corner, the crucifix was upside down. There were pull-down stairs to the attic. Now, one night, the woman of the house had been with her two girls, and they were in their bedrooms across the hall, and her husband was working at the mill. And this hulking black shape walked into her bedroom, picked up the rosary beads that were wrapped around her bedpost, and spun them in its fingers as if to say, "You think this is going to stop me?" She jumped out of the bed and ran across the hall to her first daughter. And that staircase, pull-down staircase to the attic, came smashing down on her head, knocking her out. When she came to, the door would not open. There were no locks on the girls' bedrooms, and yet they would not open until all of a sudden they opened by themselves, and they escaped the house. So I'm looking at that, and my grandfather says, "Chris, I want you to sit in the dark and wait for something to happen. We're going to go downstairs and we're going to light Holy Church incense so that we can try to religiously provoke this and get it to reveal itself." I'm thinking to myself, you want me to sit in the dark with all of this clawing going on and banging going on and growling in the same bedroom where the woman had been attacked? Okay. To say I was terrified doesn't come close. I was listening to all of this going on as they're struggling to get the church incense to stay lit. Every single time they tried to bring the pot full of incense up the stairs, it immediately would go out, which never happens. Once it's lit, it's lit. But they gave up after about an hour. Paul Bartz came up, replaced me in the bedroom, which I was so grateful for. And I was downstairs about midnight. And the lady of the house and I went out. We grabbed some sandwiches and came back to the house. No problem getting in and out of the front door. Then we went on to a radio program, WTIC AM 1060 radio with Brian Dow, I believe his name was. He had an all-night radio program. And my grandfather and the lady were sitting on the couch in the dark. I was in the recliner in the dark with a crucifix in one hand and the phone in the other hand for the interview. Paul and the husband in the house were upstairs in one of the girls' rooms. And at 3:00 in the morning, two hulking black shapes came down the stairs. And then the next 15 minutes, the woman started screaming that her face was on fire. My grandfather shone the flashlight on her face, and we watched 3 claw marks appear on her left cheek and blood drip down on her chest. She started screaming, of course. And I'm sitting there with this crucifix, and under my breath, I'm saying, "By the power of Jesus Christ, I command you to be gone. By the power of Jesus Christ, I command you to be gone." And that pot that had the Holy Church incense in it had been left out in the kitchen. It came flying around the corner of the kitchen door and straight at my head. It hit the window behind me. The blinds flew up. The glass did not break, and yet the pot was completely crushed. The lights started going on and off. The woman started screaming she wanted to get out, and I was thinking to myself, that's a good idea. So I ran to the front door, and that same door that we had just been through 3 hours earlier was now locked. We couldn't get out. The recliner that I had just been sitting in tumbled across the room straight at me. Then the door opened by itself, and she and I escaped. One of us got physically ill, and honest to God, it's been over 40 years. I don't remember if it was her or I. But the amazing thing is my grandfather, we left him sitting there in the dark, alone, on the phone for this interview, with these 2 hulking black shapes standing there, and yet it didn't faze him. After that night, after facing my fears, I've never been afraid of the paranormal again. I still worry about my son once in a while, He's 22. He'll get in trouble. But not the paranormal. I faced my fears, and I really want people to understand the power of that, because when you can overcome your fears, you free yourself. The truth is, I have seen so many amazing things in the paranormal world, and I've investigated on 5 continents. The things that I have seen, the magic use, which honestly, the whole idea of magic offends me. I have to think of it in terms of quantum physics and energy manipulation just to stomach it. And yet, I've also seen it work. I've seen it hurt people. I've seen it kill people. Some of the cases that we work on are pretty difficult. I was working on a case a couple of years ago with a fellow named Jose. He was a Puerto Rican fellow. He lived in New Jersey with his wife. He contacted us after contacting the Roman Catholic Church. The church had already investigated him, done all the background information they needed on psychiatric evaluations, doctors' records, all the things that we all feel are the responsible way of going to help a family. And they determined that he was under possession. I watched this man come under possession 2 or 3 dozen times. It was extraordinary. And unfortunately, the church didn't move quickly enough. And one night, his wife came home. She worked in a casino. He was under possession. He said, "Screw it. I'm just going to kill him." And then he ran upstairs to the balcony of the stairs, and he had an electrical cord already knotted into a noose. He put it around his neck. He jumped off and killed himself immediately. 20 minutes later, the EMT and 2 police were there. The EMT was a woman. And Jose's body sat up. He opened his eyes. His eyes were completely black. And a voice came out of him saying, "You can't have him. He's ours now." And then the body fell back dead. It's not the first death that we've had to deal with in this work. And for people who want to treat this like it's some kind of hobby, they need to keep in mind that they're dealing with real people and, real lives. And there are consequences to what they say, what they do. Everybody, especially in the Western world, we all want to jump to the conclusion what you're dealing with is a demon because you're hearing footsteps or the sound of breaking glass or your name being called. It's almost always just a human spirit. It's not something to be terribly afraid of. It's your fear that can help it to manifest in something far darker, more deadly. But that's why it's so important that you learn to overcome your fears. One time I was in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. Yes, a lot happens in Massachusetts. This was a poltergeist case again. But in this case, it was different. We had gone in there, my grandparents and Bishop McKenna and I, and done a complete cleansing of the home. And everything was fine for 2 years. Now, I had spent a lot of time in that house, so I was friends with the family. And they invited me and my cousin to spend the night. And being the gentlemen that we were, we kicked the 10-year-old out of his bed and threw our sleeping bags in there. And as we turn off the light and we're trying to go to sleep with the 10-year-old in a sleeping bag on the floor in the corner, my cousin starts yelling at me that I'm kicking the bed. I didn't feel a thing. I wasn't kicking anything. And he turned on the light. I showed him I was still in my zipped bag, and we turned off the light again. Immediately starts yelling at me because I'm kicking the bed, which I'm not. The bed lifts up, flies 10 feet across the room, slams down, and breaks into pieces. Now, the amazing thing is, that was because of the 10-year-old who was upset that we were in his bed. That was human telekinesis. That was what we are capable of. Now, if we're capable of that when we're not trying, imagine what we're capable of when we actually do try. To me, I'm not a fan of the paranormal, the way so many people are. I do this because I know there's a need and I want to help people. But the paranormal itself doesn't fascinate me the way it used to. I think it's because I see the same patterns of phenomena over and over again, depending on your culture, because each culture, the phenomena manifests differently according to your beliefs. But, people want to say, for instance, that demons are these all-knowing, all-powerful entities. And in my experience, they do not match up with the stories that are told about them all around the world. They don't show any of this tremendous intelligence. Sometimes the information that comes out is something that we don't know anything about. And that actually is one of the signs we look for. But it's usually the same pattern of intimidation, trying to get me to back off. The house fills up with shadows and the sense of the energy just becomes so oppressive. One case I had 3 nights in a row. The gas turned on the stove top without the flame and filled up the whole house with gas. But if that didn't affect me the first 2 nights, why did it bother a third night? Why do they do the same thing? I've been in cars after I broke a curse on a family. Then the brakes went on the car immediately as we were driving away from the house. And the car wouldn't start when we started to go to that case. That kind of thing happens all the time. That's energy manipulation. And energy manipulation is the simplest thing that a spirit can do. So don't be freaked out when your TV turns on and off, or the radio, or the computer, or when the batteries go dead on your cellular, even though you just charged it. That's the kind of thing that's actually the simplest thing in the world. It doesn't tell us much about the strength level of the spirit. And just like in the day-to-day world that we all walk in, most of the spirits you deal with are ordinary. They're people. And how many people do you deal with in a day that you should be afraid of? Probably more than we know, to be honest. But the truth is we get through every day without getting hurt. And these spirits are around us all the time. They're not something to really be afraid of. Of course, I've had plenty of other paranormal experiences, and some of them have been incredibly positive. I think I'd like to share a couple of those with you. Give you something so you understand that there is far more positive than there is negative out there. There was one evening, it was 2:00 in the morning. I woke up and immediately went on my computer. Don't know why. I have a friend in Argentina who's an exorcist. She was reaching out to me because a spirit had just walked into her house. And she was terrified, of course. She said that the woman was all white, dressed in long flowing desert robes and with bare feet. And I had a strong feeling as to who this was. As the spirit became more solid, its skin was darker. It had long black hair. It said something in a language the woman didn't recognize to somebody she couldn't see. I recognized the language as Arabic, and I have friends who were able to translate it for me. The spirit said, "My servants, I have a plan." And then she started showing my friend these visions, and my friend was begging for my help. And the spirit said, "We know Chris. He can't help you." Well, honestly, if there was one person that I don't want to be known by, it's the one that I suspected that this was. She was Mother Mary, which for me is a hard one to wrap my head around. But she showed apocalyptic images to my friend. Tidal waves, earthquakes, tremendous environmental upheaval, trying to warn her. And I said to my friend, "This spirit's going to come back to you. Please make sure you record it next time." Now, I meant a video recorder. But next afternoon, she got out her old cassette recorder, pressed record for 23 seconds to see if it would work. And when she replayed it, you can clearly hear two voices chanting in a different language. Again, I recognize the language as Arabic. And I sent the recording to my friend in Lebanon. And it was the Lord's Prayer in Arabic. How amazing is that? That blew my mind. I also have some very personal experiences with spirits. The more open you are to this world, the more it will reveal itself to you. When I was 16, I was driving home from a party, and I looked in the rear view mirror, and there was an old man in the back seat with me. Scared me to death. I'm on this quiet little country road, and there's this old man in the back seat. I turn around, of course, there's nobody there. I kept the overhead light on, and I sped home. Next day, at the bakery I worked at that time, I kept seeing this old man looking at me out of the corner of my eye. I'm like, why do I keep seeing an old man? A week later, I remembered to tell my mother about this. And she got out her photo album and she said, is this the man you saw? I said, yes. Who is he? She says, that's your great-grandfather. I prayed to him that night to watch over you because you always have bald tires on your car. And I was worried because it was raining. So that was my grandfather. That, by the way, is Lorraine's father. My grandparents on my grandmother's side, they had their own gifts. My grandfather, actually, great-grandfather, would show up at family gatherings. Even my grandfather, who had no psychic abilities, would see him. It was pretty amazing. If I can leave you with one message, it's simply don't be afraid. Don't jump to the conclusion that what you're dealing with is evil. Assume that it is a loved one or someone who used to live in the house before you who's there, and they're not out to hurt you. Never, ever assume that something is evil without overwhelming evidence. Never even assume something is paranormal without overwhelming evidence. Always assume that it's just something natural. I have been overwhelmed by the way the universe works and how when you're open to it, it really can reveal itself in symbols, mathematics. There is so much that we don't yet understand. And to me, it's egotistical to dismiss any of the experiences that people report without a good investigation. One of the drawbacks to science is that if it can't be replicated, then it's not scientific and they don't study it. To me, that's ignoring a great deal of the world that the scientific method is incapable of examining properly. There's so much going on, and people have tried to examine this stuff. I'm hoping that with the Warren Legacy Foundation for Paranormal Research, we can actually start unlocking some of these mysteries. And I'm thinking when we have the unified field theory for quantum physics, that's going to help us to understand these energies better and maybe even empower us. Thank you for giving me this chance to share my experiences with you. If you ever need any help, please contact us at www.warrenlegacy.com. There's a form there for you to request help. Our help is always free and confidential, and we're here for you. God bless you.
If you've had a paranormal experience and would like to be a guest on the show, please contact us by going to myparax.com. That's myparaex.com. Thanks for listening.